Welcome to the Rugby Obsession Deep Dive. Before we get into the tactical shifts and the locker room dynamics we have lined up for you today, please make sure you hit that subscribe button for Rugby Obsession.
You definitely want to stay plugged in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You want to be here so you never miss out on the analysis we unpack. And today, we actually have a very specific mission ahead of us.
It's a fascinating one, too.
It really is.
Yeah.
We are taking a close look at the massive coaching shift happening for the All Blacks. We're transitioning from the era of Scott Robertson to the new reign of Dave Rennie.
Right.
And we're going to explore why having an outsider perspective might just be New Zealand's greatest hidden advantage right now.
It is a genuinely fascinating period for the All Blacks setup. We are pulling our insights today from recent coverage by Planet Rugby.
Great source.
Absolutely. And specifically, we are zeroing in on some analysis provided by Eddie Jones.
Oh, wow.
Right. When someone with his track record starts breaking down the psychological dynamics of a rival locker room, you listen.
You have to pay attention.
Exactly. He is observing shifts happening behind the scenes that go well beyond just the standard tactical playbook.
Okay, let's unpack this. If you look at the historical context, New Zealand rugby has a very established playbook.
Almost a rigid one.
Yeah, very rigid. Typically, they promote from within the existing test team environment, like an assistant stepping up, or they pluck a highly successful coach straight out of the domestic Super Rugby franchises.
Which is exactly the pathway Scott Robertson took.
Right. But with Dave Rennie, they've completely departed from that tradition. They have chosen a man who hasn't coached in New Zealand since he left the Chiefs back in 2017.
What's fascinating here is the sheer breadth of global experience Dave Rennie is bringing back to the table.
It's extensive.
Very. When you examine his resume, it reads like a study in adapting to different rugby philosophies. I mean, before he left New Zealand, he was highly successful in that domestic ecosystem.
Right, winning back-to-back Super Rugby titles with the Waikato Chiefs in 2012 and 2013.
Exactly. But instead of just remaining in that familiar environment, he spent almost a decade abroad. He traveled to the Northern Hemisphere and coached the Glasgow Warriors until 2020.
Navigating a very different style of rugby up there.
A completely different beast. Then he took on the really high-pressure role of coaching the Wallabies. And after that stint ended, just prior to the 2023 Rugby World Cup, he moved to Japan to coach the Kobelco Kobe Steelers.
So that global journey gives him a very diverse perspective. But we do have to address the elephant in the room here.
The Australian tenure.
Yeah, you mentioned the Wallabies. For anyone just looking at the raw statistics, Dave Rennie's time in Australia ended poorly.
The numbers are tough.
We're talking about a 38% win rate. When you see a number like that for an international rugby coach, and then you see him handed the keys to the All Blacks.
Arguably the most scrutinized coaching job in world rugby.
Exactly. It's natural to question the logic. Can New Zealand really afford to prioritize, good vibes and culture building over a proven recent international winning record?
It is a totally fair question to ask, and it certainly looks like a massive risk if you only evaluate the win column.
Right.
However, the sources paint a much more nuanced picture of what actually transpired behind the scenes in Australia. Despite that 38% win rate, Rennie received glowing feedback from his former Wallabies players.
That's interesting.
It is. And that player feedback actually played a central role in New Zealand rugby's hiring decision. They looked well beyond the scoreboard to examine the culture he built.
And the respect he commanded in what is historically a very turbulent environment.
Spot on. Furthermore, veteran All Black Brodie Retallick weighed in on this. He noted that Rennie is actually a much better coach today, precisely because of his time in Australia.
Because of the adversity.
Right. Retallick explicitly stated that Rennie was scarred by the harsh learnings of that Wallaby stint.
Wow, that phrasing really stands out. Harsh learnings.
It paints a picture.
It does. When Retallick says he was scarred, it implies a profound period of professional trial by fire. I mean, managing the Wallabies means dealing with intense media scrutiny.
And navigating resource constraints that simply don't exist in New Zealand.
Right, while trying to build cohesion in a program that has struggled for consistency for years. He took his lumps on the international stage, learned those difficult lessons regarding man management and high-stakes pressure, and now he brings that battle-tested wisdom back home.
Exactly. Being scarred in a high-performance environment means you have seen what doesn't work when the pressure is at its absolute peak.
You learn how to insulate your squad from the external noise.
Yes, and you learn how to evaluate talent when the team isn't just dominating every single weekend. In New Zealand, Coaches often manage teams that are expected to win easily.
But in Australia, Rennie had to learn how to manage a team fighting from the back foot.
That builds a very specific type of resilience that New Zealand rugby clearly values right now.
Before we dive into how that resilience is going to clash with the legacy left by Scott Robertson, I want to take a quick second to ask you, the listener, to hit subscribe on Rugby Obsession.
Please do.
And also, we really want to hear from you. Jump into the comments and let us know your thoughts and opinions on how you feel about Dave Rennie taking the reins.
It's a very polarizing topic.
It is. Do you view his time away as a strategic positive? Or does that 38% win rate make you nervous? Let us know what you think.
It is a crucial debate, especially when you contrast Rennie's arrival with the coach he is replacing. Consider Scott Robertson.
Right?
He entered the All Blacks job straight off, one of the most unprecedented runs in domestic rugby history, winning 7 Super Rugby titles in 7 consecutive seasons with the Crusaders.
That level of domestic dominance is staggering.
It is. But, as Eddie Jones points out in our sources, that success came with a specific psychological byproduct for the national team.
Right, because when you have a coach who has just won 7 titles with one specific group of guys at the Crusaders, it is just human nature for the rest of the country to look at that dynamic and think there might be an inherent bias.
Whether it was demonstrably true or not, the perception existed. If we connect this to the bigger picture, Eddie Jones brought this up recently on the Rugby Unity podcast. He noted that because of Robertson's profound success with the Crusaders, there was a lingering perception that he would naturally favor Crusaders players when selecting the national squad.
Which makes sense from a human standpoint.
Right. Jones was careful to clarify he wasn't claiming that was the objective reality. But in an elite high-performance environment, perception often becomes reality for the athletes.
Let's ground that in the actual rugby for a second. If you are a standout player for the Chiefs or the Hurricanes, and you walk into an All Blacks camp where the terminology, the defensive structures, and the attacking shapes are essentially lifted from the Crusaders' playbook.
You naturally feel a step behind.
Exactly. You're trying to learn a new language while the Crusaders players are already fluent. That creates a subtle but very real psychological hurdle.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. If an athlete from another franchise feels the tactical deck is stacked against them, or that the coach inherently trusts the players who executed his system domestically, it can subtly affect their drive.
And their integration into the national squad. Here's where it gets really interesting. This brings us to the undeniable strategic advantage of Dave Rennie.
The clean slate.
Yes. Because he has been out of the country for nearly a decade,
Whoa.
he has zero attachment to the current crop of franchise players.
None at all.
He hasn't been working day in and day out with the Crusaders, the Blues, or anyone else in New Zealand.
Yeah.
He is walking into that locker room with a completely blank canvas.
And that blank canvas is the exact psychological spark Eddie Jones believes will fundamentally alter this team.
How so?
Jones delivered a very pointed takeaway on this dynamic. He said, and I quote, "Every player in New Zealand now will think they have a chance to play for the All Blacks."
Wow. Consider the power of that realization across a national talent pool.
The playing field suddenly feels entirely level.
The ripple effect of that across all the franchise locker rooms in the country has to be immense. You have players, perhaps those who felt discarded or overlooked under previous regimes, particularly from franchises like the Blues, who suddenly feel revitalized.
They absolutely do.
They're looking at Dave Rennie and realizing he doesn't have preconceived notions about their fit in a specific domestic system. He is evaluating them strictly on their current form and output.
Our sources actually highlight a specific example of this mentality using Dalton Papali'i.
That's a great example.
The context here is vital to understand. Papali'i is heading over to France to play for Castres in the top 14.
Right.
Due to New Zealand rugby's strict eligibility rules, which prohibit overseas-based players from national selection, he likely won't even be considered for the All Blacks this year. He is essentially out of the selection frame.
Which makes his attitude all the more revealing. Even knowing he is likely disqualified by the governing body's rules, the mentality he represents in the article is what really matters here. Eddie Jones points out that players like Papali'i are suddenly thinking, I'm a red-hot goer.
Precisely. I'm a red-hot goer. It is a mindset of pure, unadulterated hunger.
Yeah.
When a player who is technically moving out of the eligibility window still feels that intense pull of competition because the environment is so merit-based, it speaks volumes about the cultural shift Rennie is initiating.
It perfectly illustrates the immense value of bringing an unbiased, outside perspective into a legacy sporting institution. And for you listening right now, we see this in high-performance sports all the time.
Across all disciplines.
Exactly. When a legacy team brings in an outsider, the internal hierarchy is totally shattered. When everyone realizes they are starting at zero, internal competition skyrockets. The established veterans stop resting on their laurels, and the fringe players who felt overlooked suddenly start pushing themselves to new limits.
That internal friction is exactly what New Zealand needs. Their team is currently in a critical development phase. And the single most important ingredient for development at the international level is fierce, uncompromising competition for starting positions.
Nobody can afford to feel safe.
Nobody. This ties directly into another observation Eddie Jones made regarding what truly sets the All Blacks apart. He discussed Brodie Retallick, highlighting that Retallick possesses the ultimate All Blacks differentiator, the ability to maintain standards to the highest extreme.
And when we talk about the highest extreme, we aren't just talking about showing up on time or putting in a good shift in the gym.
No, not at all.
We are talking about the granular details of the sport, the intensity of the contact sessions, the sheer precision in the ruck, the uncompromising demand for excellence in every single drill.
Exactly. And if you want an entire squad of over 30 men to maintain standards at that highest extreme, you cannot allow an ounce of complacency to settle in.
Not enough.
Rennie's blank canvas approach is the perfect catalyst to enforce this. When the players know the new head coach is judging them purely on the evidence they provide him today, it forces every single athlete to elevate their game and hit those extreme standards just to get notice.
It's the equivalent of hitting a massive reset button on the national program. The raw talent has always been there in New Zealand, but now they have this structural shakeup that completely revitalizes their internal drive.
It is incredibly sharp analysis from Eddie Jones.
It is. He spotted that the very thing that made Rennie an outsider, his time away from the New Zealand domestic structure, is exactly what makes him the optimal choice for the job at this specific moment in time.
It is a paradox, but a highly effective one. He is the ultimate insider who became an outsider and now returns to disrupt the status quo.
It's going to be wild to watch unfold.
It really is, and this raises an important question, which brings us to a final, provocative thought to leave you with today. While Dave Rennie is engineering this cultural reset within the All Blacks, the rest of the world is not standing still.
That is very true.
The sources we analyzed today also mention a stark warning from Eddie Jones on the sidelines of this coaching change. Jones believes that the Springboks currently possess a massive advantage over the rest of the rugby world.
The Springboks have been the absolute benchmark lately, and Jones attributes this advantage to the innovative changes inspired by Rassie Erasmus in South Africa.
They are operating on another level.
We're talking about deep structural shifts in how they utilize their squad depth, their tactical flexibility, and the psychological edge they bring to test match rugby. They have effectively stolen a march on their historic rivals.
They have completely redefined what it takes to win at the highest level. So the lingering question for us all to ponder is this. Will Dave Rennie's fresh outsider perspective and the new era of hyper-competition he is actively creating be the exact spark the All Blacks need to counter the strides being made by South Africa and the Northern Hemisphere?
It's a massive challenge.
Can an unbiased culture shift overcome the tactical innovations we are seeing from the Springboks?
That is the defining question of this new era. The Springboks are setting the pace, and the All Blacks are going through this fascinating metamorphosis to try and reclaim that top spot. We really want to know what you think about this dynamic. Jump into the comments right now and share your thoughts and opinions on that exact question.
We read all of them.
We do. Can Dave Rennie's clean slate and high extreme standards counter the Springboks' current advantage? Let us know. And before we go, here is your final reminder to please subscribe to Rugby Obsession. Your support means the world to us, and it helps ensure we can keep bringing you these deep dives into the strategies and stories shaping the sport. Thank you for listening to the Rugby Obsession Deep Dive, and we'll look forward to listening to our next episode.